We're almost there, people. The race for the White House heating up just 12 days before Iowa. Sarah Palin, not the only big name hitting the campaign trail. We're going to recap it all for you, whether you like it or not. Then it's all about the law tonight and the top legal cases happening as we speak, including the Supreme Court ruling on President Obama's immigration executive action. This one could be a game changer. Then thousands of residents of Flint, Michigan, they are suing. And they got good reason to. That over the contaminated drinking water that has gotten so many people sick, and it turns out officials knew about it. Tonight I'll ask the table if they have a case. Well, good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. We'll get into those stories and so much more over the course of the hour. But before we get to those legal topics, we're going to bring our attorneys in for that and get to the legal stories. But first, our senior political reporter, Andrew Whitman, catches us up on the update in the 2016 race. Andrew?
We're going to give them hell.
It was a Tea Party Trump card for the Donald in Iowa yesterday. Sarah Palin in full form.
Doggone right we're angry.
Palin, the former Alaska governor and one-time Republican VP nominee, says she chose to endorse Trump because the others lack guts.
They didn't want to talk about these issues till he brought them up. In fact, they've been wearing this political correctness kind of like a suicide vest.
Trump unleashing Palin after Senator Ted Cruz said Trump has, quote, New York values, questioning his conservatism.
Funny, but now what they're doing is wailing, well, Trump and his trumpeters, well, they're not conservative enough. Oh, my goodness gracious. What the heck would the establishment know about conservatism?
Back in February, Palin got some laughs on SNL by joking that she might run for president in 2016 with Trump on her ticket.
How much do you think Lauren Michaels would pay me if I were to run in 2016?
I don't think there's a number too big.
And what if I were to choose Donald Trump as my running mate?
Sarah, you're teasing us. That's not nice.
But Palin wasn't teasing yesterday.
No more pussyfooting around. Are you ready for a commander-in-chief? You ready for a commander-in-chief who will let our warriors do their job and go kick ISIS ass?
The Palin endorsement, a blow to Cruz, who used Palin's help to win his seat in the Senate.
Regardless of what Sarah decides to do in 2016, I will always remain a big, big fan of Sarah Palin.
Cruz now fighting back with far-right star power of his own. Duck Dynasty star Phil Robertson cutting a Cruz ad as part of an endorsement. And the senator scheduling an appearance Saturday with Glenn Beck, now officially in the Cruz camp. On the Democratic side, all eyes on a startling poll from New Hampshire showing Bernie Sanders out to a huge lead, 27 points, opening the door to possible Sanders wins in the first two election contests, and refueling talk that Clinton is in for a long primary slog, that her campaign took Sanders too lightly, and getting some to wonder if for Hillary, 2016 will be a year of deja vu. Again, the frontrunner and presumptive nominee, only to see it all slip away to a lesser-known Democrat.
Clinton still holds a commanding lead nationally and in every state that follows Iowa and New Hampshire, especially in South Carolina and the southern states that vote on Super Tuesday, March 1st. But those numbers are often impacted and often change after voters react to results from the first races. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you. And Andrew will be in New Hampshire for primary night. Of course, we'll have live reports for that. Now, we're going to pivot to a Supreme Court case that has tons of political implications. I'm talking about the legal challenge to President Obama's executive order that would overhaul the immigration system. Now, the administration wants to prevent millions of deportations and let those people continue to work here legally. Now, the president's political opponents say he's overstepping his powers by going around Congress. 26 states, led by Texas, filed a lawsuit saying the president ignored federal law and abused his power. This case is being widely watched because experts say it could sway the balance of power between the branches of government. Let's bring in our panel right now. Christopher Cabanillas, he is the founder and principal of Cabanillas and Associates. Doug Von Oys, founding partner of Carson Von Oys, focusing on corporate misconduct. And he was selected by Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in our nation. Aren't we lucky, Jimmy? Jimmy Koussouris, a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School, also the Bar Association's Queens, New York City, and when he makes his time across the pond. All right. What do you think is really at stake here? Is it about executive power, in effect, and executive privilege of being able to make an order, or is this about immigration? At the end of the day, depending on how the court rules, what do you think the big takeaway is going to be?
Well, clearly it's about immigration in that it's going to affect millions of people that are living in the United States that have no status, that are in the shadows right now. If this gets approved, this will allow a lot of people to get work permits, driver's licenses, and so it's really going to be a game changer.
You specialize in immigration law here. Without saying the name of the person, describe their current state, and what it would mean if, in effect, here the Supreme Court found for the way of the 26 states, like Texas and others, and they said you got to go back.
Right. Well, what it means is already they don't have an ability to be here oftentimes. This is somebody who maybe has been here 20 years or more in certain cases. They have children that are citizens here or perhaps legal residents here, and they want to actually go out and live and contribute and get a work permit and drive. They can't do any of that right now. And what this gave them, Obama's move gave them, was hope. Hope that, in fact, they could become a member of society, work, contribute, and participate just like the rest of us. And what happened is that by this lawsuit, everything got stopped. And that hope that was there suddenly became this horror that it's just going to be the same old, same old.
And in a practical way, did these folks who may have been in the shadows before come out of the shadows because of the executive order of the president, and now they're worried that, wait a minute, now all of a sudden I'm out in the open, I'm on a piece of paper here. Right. If the court rules the way I don't want, now all of a sudden they got me and I can go back, when before it wasn't a great way to live, but at least I lived without being in public view.
Right, not yet, because what happened was that there was an injunction that came out just a couple of days before they were about to start taking applications for this. So a lot of people who were gearing up to apply for it actually knew better than to apply for it because they weren't allowed to yet.
Doug, this could be about more than just immigration, though, because as we know, with the polarization in Congress right now, the president has taken several executive orders here to go around Congress to not completely revamp, for example, the immigration system and reform the entire system, but more so tinker with it, or maybe more than tinker around on the edges on this. This could define what the executive branch can do versus the legislative branch, can it?
Yes, and my understanding, the decision will probably come down right when they're in the middle of the presidential election. So it's going to have a lot to do with the next president who sits in that office, what he can and can't do.
You know, Jim, I think a lot of people sometimes underestimate the importance of when a case like this comes down, because they think, oh, it's about policy, perspective, and this will change lives. And more than that, some of the things that we've heard about where people say, oh, let's round them all up and all the rest, it won't be that, but it'll be something that I'm not sure everyone's gotten their arms around what it could look like.
I think that it would be a monumental change and affect millions of lives. The problem is that, and it's a great idea, but the problem is that you have laws in place that make certain things illegal. And you now have an executive order that is being claimed to usurp the role of the legislative branch and say, even though all of these laws have been broken,
never mind. Never mind.
So it's almost like a blanket pardon without saying the words. And I have to say, from a legal standpoint, I mean, if just a stupid example, if somebody just decided, well, bank robbery is not that bad. So everybody that's committed bank robbery that there's a warrant for, don't worry about it, it's okay. So it's a huge, huge exercise of these executive powers.
The court, in taking this case, wasn't that to supporters of the position that you, for example, hold, troubling in that they've already ruled, whether it was an Obamacare, et cetera, that there are certain liberties that need to be extended, powers that are enumerated that the executive branch, the president, can do. By them taking this case, which is the third of its kind, if you will, the tea leaves are, why would they take it if they weren't going to further clarify and redefine the limits of presidential power? I got to imagine immigration reform supporters who liked what the president did are pretty nervous right now.
Right. Well, I think, look, this Supreme Court hasn't been afraid to take on sort of the big cases. You know, I mean, if you take a look at Obamacare, if you look at gay marriage, all the stuff. I mean, they're tackling these issues that are out there, and I think it's important. I think that there is precedent, okay, for this executive action, okay? Because in Arizona versus United States, which is a big Supreme Court case that went down a few years ago, they made pretty clear that there's discretion, prosecutorial discretion, and that the federal government can basically dictate what they want to enforce and not. So the question really comes down to—
But within limits, right?
Yeah, within limits, but the question really is the president enforcing immigration laws, or is he creating them? And obviously the government's taking the position that he's enforcing them and choosing how to apply those, and the 26 states are saying that no, in fact, he's creating law.
How do you think this shakes out? I mean, again, Jimmy, for me, I read this to say they wouldn't have taken this thing, right? And it is, whatever we love to think, it is a political animal, the Supreme Court. They wouldn't have taken this case if they were going to just leave it alone.
I have to tell you, Rich, it doesn't need to be that monumental decision in terms of redefining. It just might be restating and saying you overstepped or you didn't overstep.
But also, there's a lot of technical grounds. They're really reviewing the procedures that they put in place for his executive action. So you don't have to have a declaration of this is right or wrong. It could be you didn't do it right. And then back to the drawing board. That's really what it could come down to.
Christopher, from a macro standpoint, beyond even this case, certainly immigration reform is a big campaign issue right now. We have one candidate who's leading in his party's polls saying that he wants to build a wall in the border, deport everybody, and have the Mexicans pay for the construction of said wall. I wouldn't go to the casinos and bet on that happening. That being said, does the next administration, whoever it is, finally have to clarify this right now because of the limbo, the client after client that walks into your door? They're looking for clarity, right? Even if they came here wrong, you have families, you have people that were born here, you have people that weren't, you have candidates calling them anchor. I mean, you have some ugly stuff that's going on right now and being said. More than anything else, are people just looking for clarity?
I think what the problem is that Congress can't really get anything done right now. Anything that Obama wants to do and he puts forward, they're shooting it down. There's just too much political divide.
And by the way, for my political world, remember, George W. Bush offered up, I would argue, a more aggressive or sympathetic immigration reform plan when he was sitting president, obviously as a Republican, than even this president, and it didn't get Republican votes. But a sitting Republican president tried, I think, a more comprehensive plan than even this president, and it couldn't get through. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And again, I think that's been the problem. So I think that, you know, Obama, in seeing this and seeing that he can't get anything done, wanted to take action, wanted to do something, wanted to, if you will, build his legacy on this position. And I think it took a lot of courage, and he knew he was going to have a fight, and I think they're prepared for that fight, and I think they're going to win that fight.
It'll be interesting, and the polling on this one's fascinating across the country. All right. There are now 3 class action lawsuits over the contaminated drinking water in Flint, Michigan. Now, if you've listened to this story in the periphery, trust me, you're going to want to hear the details or at least the allegations. The suits say the water is laced with lead and other carcinogens, but you know what? Moreover, they say their own leadership knew about it and chose to keep quiet to save a few bucks. These people are mad, understandably so, and they want retribution. But it's a little complicated as to whether or not they're going to get it. Stay with us.